At AIA Australia, helping your clients in their time of need is our number one priority. In 2016, we paid over $1.15 billion in claims to both retail and group members. That's over $4.5 million every working day. To offer your clients cover you can trust, chat to your AIA CDM today.
Hi everybody, welcome to this week's edition of XY Live. Actually live from XeroCon today. I'm sitting in the Melbourne Convention Centre, so hopefully none of the sessions come out because I'm just outside. We've got Muneesh Wadha with us from Humanity in Business. Welcome, Muneesh.
Hi guys, hi Adrian.
Good to have you. There's some awesome stuff we're going to be covering with Muneesh today around best practice employment, how the best businesses do it. And he's going to have a few suggestions around what advisors take out. We're even going to have a look at how maybe we can do it with clients. First, a big shout out to AIA, the partner that supports XY Live. If you haven't checked out their Vitality program, we definitely suggest you do. It's a really unique proposition for clients, and a lot of practices that have been using it have a big uptick in engagement with insurance. There's a lot of health benefits that start to flow through to clients, boost juice, vouchers, etc., things like that. So they're doing a really cool job there. So check it out. So Muneesh, Humanity in Business. Let's talk a bit about what that is and what you've been doing over the last few years, because it's a really big passion project of yours, and I've seen you present about it before. Share with the guys what it's about.
Yeah, so really Humanity in Business is really about two things, and one of the main things is all about values and purpose within the business space. So I guess what we're trying to do is we realize that the biggest challenge corporations face today is about employee engagement, and really people being passionate about and loving what they do. The employee engagement rate currently in most companies is around 30%, which means more than half of your employees are pretty much don't want to be there. They're doing jobs where they're kind of ambivalent about it and not really want to be in that space. But so really, I believe that as change gets exponentially faster and quicker, employee engagement is going to be a big issue. And so what we're doing is that we realize that the key to employee engagement is leadership. And speaking of AIA, the CEO of AIA, Damien Moo, is an exceptional leader. He's very young. He's speaking at one of my events in February next year. But really it comes down to what kind of leaders are creating engagement within their organizations to drive change and to create better outcomes. So what we do is we basically look at sharing the importance of how do we build leadership capability to actually help drive better business outcomes, but also what does that new leadership look like?
Mm-hmm.
People don't know what great leadership is because they've never really seen it. I said, like, you talk to people in businesses, they're like, how amazing is your business leader? And like, what are you talking about? My leader, we have a toxic culture. It's like the boss is telling us get on with it and do it. And really having great leadership is almost like no one's really heard of great leadership. And then now you've got the government, and that's a different story. But pretty much there's a gap of huge leadership in business. And I guess what we're doing is building a brand around great leadership.
Okay. Are you finding that you can put different leaders in, certain styles and boxes? Is that sort of how things play out, or is each business completely unique? Is that what's your take on it?
A lot of the leaders have similar values. And regardless of the business you're in, whether you're an advisor, whether you're an investor, whether you're a bank, whether you're a manufacturing company, great leaders have pretty much very aware of their own values and what's important to them. And they put people at the heart of everything they do, not profit. So it's people before profit.
So if you walked into a business like this afternoon and you'd start with the values of the leaders, is that sort of where you'd begin?
Yeah, so what we do is we do lots of events around, I guess, putting the light and showcasing the light on what does great leadership look like. Mm-hmm. So we host a lot of events, and they talk about, here's what I do and how I lead my people. And it's about walking the talk, So it's very good to put the values on the wall and, do the beautiful vision statements on the website. But the reality is when the shit hits the fan, what does it look like, and how do the leaders react, and how do they take care of their people? And that's really hard to do.
Okay. So like you're saying that, you can do the initial stuff and sort of put it all down and think about it. But unless is a part of what you do with leaders is actually make sure, help them maintain that and
Right.
sort of walk the
So
walk.
what we do, we take their stories and then educate other executives around, well, that's how this leader's done it. What does it take for you to do it? And it's about really, it's almost like we have to re-educate people around their values, what's important to them. You know, most of us haven't really been educated around what's it like to be a good human being. It's something we've learned from our parents and growing up, but really around our leadership development, it's never really been integrated. And even from school upwards, it's never been integrated, including in all the business domains like project management, investment, financial services. The leadership conversation only comes later on. It's not like they teach it to you, in depth as you go, right from the ground up. So we basically.
Do you find it's really an experience thing most of the time, or?
Sorry, say that again.
Do you find it's an experience thing?
Yeah, absolutely experiential. You got to go through it yourself, and that's the only way to learn. You got to learn the hard way, and you got to do it to realize what's working and what's not working.
And I guess, do you, as a sort of part of what you're doing, you're sort of giving a few shortcuts to a lot of other leaders by sharing their stories.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah.
So by sharing the stories, people can get ideas. Oh, okay, that's how I need to do it. And there are sometimes difficult things like hard conversations with people, restructuring going on. And it takes a certain kind of leadership to do that in a nice way, which doesn't, piss people off and get stuff done out of them. So we really, I guess, through our events, educate on how to do things differently, lead change differently, do projects differently, do customer centricity differently.
So what's the closest business that you've worked with to like a financial advice practice, or have you worked with a financial advice practice?
Well, you mentioned AIA in the beginning.
Yeah.
The Vitality program, the greatest leaders, and AIA is one of the biggest, better companies out there, are actually not the Vitality program, what you're talking about, is actually a fantastic example of great leadership, because Damien, who's the CEO there, has actually looked at his first thing is about his people and then his customers. So he's actually extremely passionate about, ensuring their employees are taken care of, but at the same time, making sure that really translates into welfare and well-being for their customers. So that is at the heart of his leadership. It's not like, oh, we're doing it because it's a good idea and let's make a quick buck out of it, and therefore it's a good, business model. It might take a longer play to get money out of or get return on investment, but it will eventually. So it's a more sustainable way of doing business. So, do
you find these are usually like it's a long play sometimes, or very commonly?
Correct. And that's the hard bit, right? The long play. Who wants to play the long game, or who wants to play the short? If you want to play the short game, you can do it. It's always been done, right? If you want to play the long game, that's really where the value is at. And, the best companies are playing the long game.
I suppose it's just the leadership part is balancing out the short-term pressures to sort of and defend that long-term vision as much as possible, so it plays through.
And good leaders will always put people first, no matter how hard the pressures are. When to perform short-term, they will still push back and say, no, we are in it for the long term. Therefore, the people element is always the first thing, and that's a hard thing to do when you're getting hammered from all sides.
Yeah, well, I think like if we think about advice practices out there, it is one of the hardest bloody thing. The single planner advisors out there, I've been one, I am one. It's hard, and I think a lot of guys will be going, well, yeah, it's really hard. So that the challenge of that long play versus the short play, and with a lot of advisors out there sort of putting more thought into their advice solution or their process, it's a bit of that space, because that, like, every time everyone in XY Advisor is sort of iterating what they're doing, that's a form of leadership. They're leading their clients to a new outcome.
Totally.
And that time investment is always at the expense of some sort of short term. You could be seeing another client and just doing the same thing and actually bringing in some money.
Correct.
So, yeah,
and I think that's it's sticking to those guns. And when you talk about ethical investment, those are long plays. And, there are companies that are out there doing the right thing, but it comes over time. And Unilever is a great example. The CEO there has pushed back on investors and said, if you want short-term games, we are not your company. Go somewhere else and find short-term. We're interested in the mums and dads who want long-term investment with us. And that's the kind of investor we're looking for. So really it comes down to the kind of companies that you invest in as well. And also, of course, the advisor has to play a big role in that.
With the advice practices, is there any suggestions around where you've seen some of the companies balance that out really well and how they do that? Because obviously these big businesses you're dealing with, they've got this challenge of balancing the short term versus the long term.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you've seen that have really helped to facilitate that and make sure the short term objectives get taken care of?
Well, I think the great example is a company called Konica Minolta.
Mm-hmm.
They're a tech company. They make printers. You're probably familiar with the brand.
Mm-hmm.
In a tech company which is highly disrupted in the printer market, who prints stuff anymore? But the point is, the guys have, because of their focus on people, they have grown their market share and taken business away from their competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And what he's done is, over time, because of his focus on employee engagement and building the people skill set, capability, he's
Mm-hmm.
actually grown his business in a market that's not growing at all.
So you're saying there's been more immediate effects from that focus as well as the longer term?
Absolutely. So
Yep.
what's happened is that the customers have seen that their commitment to their customers and to their people, and that they're there to support the customers for the long term. And because of the shift in the values, the customers have stuck on, and they've got new customers as a result of that.
Mm.
So, and the pressures of short term is always cut cost because, hey, the market's shrinking, the printer market's dying, it's not growing. So naturally the pressures are going to be hammered, but the leaders, there, David Cook, who runs the company there, has pushed back on that, said, no, well, we're going to stick to it because this is our strategy. And he's constantly fighting back. But it comes back to the leadership conversation, right?
Mm.
Are you a strong enough leader to say, no, I'm going to stick with my guns? Or are you going to buckle into pressure and start, doing whatever they tell you to do?
Well, I suppose a good way to relate it to advice practices is the referred client aspect. So most of the best practices get referrals from their existing clients, and to me, that's always been that's the focus. If you can make your business more referable, then that's a great business model. But I guess the challenge around that, and that's it's that extra time and effort with those existing clients to get that happening. And I suppose that's a lot of advisors, some of the advisors, there's some great XY Live sessions we've had where practices that have developed really get a lot of client referrals. A lot of it comes down to time with the client. So it is still that trade-off, but I guess.
It is. And I think, if there are some companies that are focused on the short term, then, they'll lose the people, and the people won't want to work for them. And, advisors might not want to work for a practice owner that's, always focused on short terms, particularly if it comes at a cost to the customer and a cost to might win short terms, but it's a personal choice we have to make. Do we want to stick around with this company? Do we want to move on and find somebody who wants to play the long game?
Yeah, well, that's like for the employed advisors out there. I know plenty of stories where that's exactly what's played out, and they end up leaving. So, like from a practice owner standpoint, if you're employing advisors, that's something that you really need to be conscious of.
Totally. I think it's important to even qualify that when you're getting interviewed or going into a new practice. What do you guys? How do you work? What do you guys look at? What's your culture like? And really drilling down on the cultural leadership style of the practice owner and culture.
What are some of the questions that you'd ask if you went into a practice?
Well, I think that choosing the right practice and speaking to not just the people who interview, but the other employees, in the business, and say, well, what's it like working there?
Mm-hmm.
Working your ass off 12 hours a day, not, no work-life balance. Are you, does the leader understand you? Does he care about you? And not more than putting foosball tables and giving you beer after work on Friday, but does he actually there to support your growth and development as part of their team? So, some of the questions are very much directly to employees who can give you great insight around what the leadership and the culture there is like. So speak to more than just the interviewer and the manager who interviews you, and ask if you can speak to the other employees.
And so, for the practice owners, I guess, make sure you talk to all the people, and so everyone's got the same story about the practice.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I mean, the practice owner, if he's really walking the talk, then people will say the guy is a good guy, or the guy that she's really doing well, and she's really genuine in her care for people, or not just saying one thing but doing another. People will straight away pick it up. It's not rocket science, and you know how the practice owner is operating, and whether they're a good operator or not.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Have we we like to say sometimes XY, like the good bloke test sort of thing.
Correct.
That's always a simple assessment. So we're talking about the long game versus short game sort of thing, and like that sort of sacrifice initially to. Do you have some gold and some suggestions that people could just go and do now, today? Like if they wanted to do some instant uptick in their business, what are some of the things that you've seen businesses do and they've had instant turnaround in terms of how employees have engaged with what they're doing, and how the business is operated?
I think in terms of the instant turnaround thing, I think again it's a bit challenging to get it straight off the bat. Because we're talking about the human, it's a time thing, right? So I think the first thing easily is really having real conversations, and I think the hard part is having the real conversations. Taking feedback. What am I not doing well? What can we do better? How can we better support you? And I think the great people, the great leaders that I've come to are straight away, genuinely care about their customer and their employees, genuinely, not because they have to, but because they want to make a difference. And I think putting and truly giving a shit that's beyond just, I need to do this because it's my job. There's a difference. And you can see the difference straight away when somebody approaches you on, when you pick up a phone and deal with customer service with Telstra, you can tell which customer service guy truly cares about your call or not, right?
Yeah,
so
it affects how angry you get at them.
So the immediate thing is literally talk to your stakeholders, talk to your customers first up, and just get feedback and how you can improve, how you can add value, constantly looking for that way of engaging and helping them out. And helping beyond just return on investment. It's the great guys who do customer service and help their customers go beyond that. And I think it's that beyond conversation, which is, what does that look like for your business,
Well, that's I guess it's a good segue into the client space. I know a lot of the best practices out there do client surveys. So, for example, the Practice of the Year, Advisor of the Year with the AFA, they go out and survey those advisors' clients, and they get direct feedback around how they're doing. So that's more of an assessment of how they're doing in general, and there's lots of really good insights. A number of practices now do. So, for example, I'm going to be adopting Net Promoter Score in my practice at certain points in the advice process. I know there's some practices that do phone calls and just sort of really try and.
There you go. Spot on.
So is that a big thing for advisors to just go out and ask?
And it's not rocket science, man. It's it's the simple principles of human to human engagement. It's not like you ask to do massive technology implementation to create a CRM system that's going to create this feedback loop. No, you're just calling up someone and saying, man, how can I help you, man? What are you struggling with? Are you unclear about? And it's simple as picking up the phone or setting up a meeting. It really is.
So there's no magic pills you got for us?
Make the call. Call people you haven't spoken to call customers, call people you haven't spoken to for a while, and ask for the feedback and how you can better serve them, literally with what you're offering.
Pretty simple.
I think it's pretty. I would love it if my super guy called me up more often and said, "Man, what do you think about our investments so far? What do you think you've done? How are we doing?" No one's ever called me.
Send us his details. I'm sure there's plenty of guys out there listening now that would be happy to take over what he's doing there, Muneesh.
So there's plenty of room for growth, man. And trust me, with the market the way it is, it's not hard to disrupt and be genuine in your approach. Because not many people are really doing that.
Okay, so so simple concept generally that plays out when you are dealing with businesses and what you see from what they're doing, but then I guess the complexity comes in with each of the businesses' functions and the different people involved in the business and trying to. So, for example, I guess when you think about, okay, easy for an advisor to go, yep, I'm just going to call my practices. What about inspiring your team to adopt that? And I guess is that where the leadership comes into play a bit more?
Correct. And I think this is where the leadership space is, if most of us have not been really gone through the rigorous hard yards of training of leadership, the great leaders come through the hard yards of learning the hard way, getting slapped around a bit, realizing I messed up, and then changing that. So I think really, getting a leadership advisor or coach is probably the first step. People think, oh yeah, I don't really need a coach, I'm good. but man, trust me, everyone needs a coach. Someone who can be a sounding board, feedback. I think the challenge for most leaders and people in businesses is self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Really knowing what is it that individually as you, if you're a leader, what are your vulnerabilities that might be showing up, which you might not be aware of, but other people can see it.
Mm.
Right? And that's a really hard thing and a lot of people in your team might be afraid or not wanting to point that out to you, but good leaders get feedback and openly seek it as well.
So that self-awareness piece, is that?
Yes. So that self-awareness piece, it can be cultivated, but you need feedback, because if you don't get feedback, you don't know what to improve.
Mm.
But it takes guts, right? To tell someone, you're pretty shit at this, and take it from somebody who works for you or your colleague. That's hard.
Yeah, I found it hard in the past to get, like, you're asking for feedback, and you want a bit more directness, but sometimes it's a challenge to get that because of a fear on the employee's side, of pissing you off, or
correct. And you have to set the space. You got to be clear around, hey, listen, this is not, I'm not going to hold this against you, or something. I'm asking you to be honest, but also make it constructive, right? So not just tell me I'm shit,
Yeah. So what's the problem? But also, what do you suggest?
Correct.
You do to fix it.
And if you don't have one, but at least now you heard it from somebody who works with you, and you say, wow, because the best leaders sometimes need a wake-up call, right? They're like, by getting a feedback, they're like, wow, I wasn't realized I was doing that. And they're like, okay, point taken, and then they'll adjust their leadership style, or they allow themselves to be caught out and say, all right, I did that again, sorry guys,
So do a lot of these large businesses that you deal with, do you find that the leaders in those businesses have coaches as well? Is that something that you see?
Yeah, I mean, at the highest level, most of them do. They have a mentor, they have a coach, spends an hour with them to get that feedback, because it can be pretty lonely as a leader, because there's so much pressure there to do stuff. Having someone who can sort of have a sounding board, I think it's quite critical. I've had one and still do. So really recommend that, because you might think that it's not useful, but actually at times when the chips are down and you're feeling the pressure, it's a great way to get feedback and release as well in terms of what's going on for you.
Yeah, well, with the XY Advisor Group, I think it functions a bit as a bit of a sounding board for a lot of people, and it's been great. The engagement, the feedback that we're getting from advisors and what they're benefiting. But at the same time, I guess it doesn't replace, there's a number of really good business coaches in the group as well that are out there. So I'd encourage everyone to check them out, because there's nothing. I think that accountability piece is one of the key elements that comes into play.
Totally. Accountability is what they hold you at, and also feedback loop, which is really critical for leadership to improve.
Do you operate on what's the timeframes that you operate with your coaches?
Oh, what do you mean in terms of how often do I see them?
Yeah.
Well, typically probably once a week.
Okay.
If not once a fortnight, depending on what's going on for me. But I just find that, even if it's something I'm unsure, because decisions can be really difficult sometimes. And to get clarity on some decisions is really powerful. And sometimes a business and a leadership coach combined or separately is actually a really powerful combination.
Yeah. Okay. So what complements are you looking for? Someone that complements your skill set or understanding? So someone that has another sphere of, is that how how this has worked for you?
Well, from a leadership perspective, I mean, the complementing thing, I think, is more from a business perspective. So, people typically hire people who complement them really well. So they bring people on their team and they don't have the similar skill set, so they have somebody else who has different skill sets, and that's really good from a business perspective. From a personal leadership perspective, it's very much a coach who understands the human behavior and and humanity, really. So knowing the personal development challenges that we can experience, and having what are the challenges of becoming more self-aware, and that's really hard when you're in the middle of crisis or a focus or pressure. And chips are down and there's fear everywhere. That's when you need someone to sort of support you on that journey. Otherwise, it can get pretty overwhelming. Especially, I would think in the financial services industry, that would be pretty overwhelming with some of the pressures that the industry faces. Yeah,
definitely. There's over the years there's been lots of incidents that pop up, and I'm sure it's defined quite a lot of leaders in this space. So
absolutely.
So we've got a question from the audience. Clays. Yeah, it's sort of. Oh, it's more of a comment. We might take that as a comment. Clay's just said he's happy to help out poking holes in my leadership style. So thanks, Clay, and it's always good to know that someone's out there willing to do that for you. You make me a stronger leader, Clay. So Muneesh, we were talking about going into the investment space. So I know there's B Corp, where like there's it's a sort of an assessment of a type of business and the way they manage the business and
Yeah.
that they subscribe to. What are some of the things that you're aware of in this space, and some of the filters that like if people really want to apply this to their investment regime, what are some of the things
So
that you
it's
suggest?
funny you mentioned that. I was just looking at saying, man, if I had the money to invest, I'd probably know the company straight off the bat as to where to put my money in. It's simply, I know the leaders. You've got AIA, great company to invest in right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's very simple: the culture and leadership. And a great measure of that is look at the best places to work. You know, all the list of great places to work. Best employers in Australia. There's a list of a couple of consultancies run around, you know, how good the culture is and how good that is. And if there are any public listed companies on that, or by all means, go for it. Because to be honest, they're all pretty consistent in their performance. And if you look at AIA, pretty consistent in the performance. There's Unilever, there's a whole bunch of them. And if you look at it globally, there's so many. I mean,
So those awards that they have around best places to work, do you find that it's not bullshit, that there is a correlation?
There's a correlation there. So there are mostly smaller companies in those lists, but there are some lists that have larger companies. The bigger the company, the probably harder it is to really identify. So really looking for the medium cap companies, which are probably 300, 500, 700 employees, probably even up to 1,000 employees. Because the bigger the company gets, the harder it is for the leadership to actually trickle down, and the culture becomes a challenge, right? Because
all the levels of management, etc.
Correct. So really identifying the smaller size organizations, under 1,000 employees, ideally. Another one, Smart Group. There's Smart salary packaging company. I think there are 500 or 700 employees. That's where really you can see consistent growth there year on year. And I think it's truly because of the excessive focus on hiring the right people who are culturally aligned to their values, and the CEO's passion for the culture.
Well, and the other side of that is that there's some statistics around how that flows into performance as well, isn't there?
Correct.
I remember you talking about that before. What are some of do you have those off the top of your head?
So, I mean, I think companies that have a high performance culture probably outperform. There is a company called, a book called, run by Raj Sisodia, who wrote Conscious Capitalism. But Firms of Endearment is called.
Okay.
And in that he showed, there's a chart in there which shows that companies that were, I guess, had more values driven organizations probably performed the S&P 500 by something like 50%.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking of. There's like they've done back testing on these businesses that, and it was huge. So
really the culture, and that's really the culture piece, and I think that's what's really driving consistent growth. And again, it's a long play, right? So it's a long-term investment which companies with great cultures are focused on.
Well, it's a long-term investment for the company, but like I suppose for an investment management side of things, you can get the benefit of that now, because if they've done the right investment previously, then they should be getting the benefit from an outperformance standpoint.
And a lot of CEOs say, yeah, we are great into culture, but saying one thing, doing is the other, right? So I think doing a bit of homework also around the CEO, and if you got any artists, if they write any blogs or podcasts or anything which you can really hear the CEO talk, and I think you'll see the way they talk and the way they talk about their people. Jeff Weiner at LinkedIn, Satya Nadella at Microsoft, Paul Coleman at Unilever. The list goes on, and the way they talk and they write their blogs and stuff, you can tell that they have an automatic passion for people, which probably most CEOs won't even talk about. They'll start talking about results and shareholder value and what we're doing as a business and da 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 da. So
I'd be interested for the guys out there that if anyone knows of, I guess, ways to get exposure to businesses like this from whether it's from a managed fund standpoint, drop it in the group there so anyone can check it out, because it's a cool concept. It's if you've got a tick in terms of the human side of things, you've got a tick in terms of investment outperformance. To me, it sounds like a no-brainer. I guess it comes down to accessibility. Maybe for the fund managers out there, something to look at, and maybe Vanguard can generate another index.
Totally. There is an index, I think, in the US called RIP, and they actually focus on is it culturally great places to work? I'll send you the link, anyways.
Yeah, awesome.
And they're very much a fund that's focused on sustainability and culture, and they've identified which of those companies.
Yeah, well, I know. I think B Corp I think there might be an ETF, exchange traded fund in the US, that gives exposure to an index of B Corp businesses, which, so it's just, I remember I was looking into that a while back, and
definitely, so, the US definitely has them for sure, because the scale is much bigger there. And they're all consistently growing. So there's definitely there's a sure bet there for sure.
Yeah, great. So so in terms of, I guess, what we're doing with XY Advisor, here's our free consulting. Looking at so we're going to say it's okay, Muneesh, it's okay to be critical, especially around Clayton. If you've got anything to say about him, what do you think from a culture and leadership standpoint, from what you've seen us doing? What would you?
Guys.
Yeah.
Well, mate, I think you're doing a great job as it is. I think, to be honest, like you're saying, you're all over the place, all over the country, doing great meetings and events. Fantastic. And I think really the community is crying out for more. So you probably can't do enough, because there's so much time commitment, and you guys are doing it as, it's not your full-time jobs. And I think people want to learn more, and they want to understand more about the space. So really passionate about the more you can engage and bring the community together, by sharing stories, lessons learned, what worked, what didn't work, that's really, I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think I'm really passionate about that. I don't believe most companies are not doing enough of that, where you bring your stakeholders as often as you can together. And you are going on a roadshow, great, which is fantastic, and keep doing that. Just crank it up, and even more and more so. Ultimately, I told Clay as well, I said, you guys got a Chamber of Commerce about to happen. It's pretty much that's what we're talking about, is a new way of investing. So, and we have to keep educating, and it's the key. And this is what I'm doing with my events, is educate, because we forget.
Yeah, one of the interesting, when you talk about stakeholders there and bringing them in, I think one of the more interesting aspects of what's happened with the XY Advisor Facebook group is, like initially we're like, oh, do you let product provider and service providers in? And to me, that's been one of the most profound impacts. Those guys coming in and just playing by the rules in terms of not flaunting products and contributing valuably to conversations. That's been awesome. But also the flow through and the impact on the industry. We're seeing conversations in XY Advisor actually flow through and creating outcomes in terms of how businesses are making decisions, which I think is fantastic, because people with problems in XY Advisor are getting heard directly. And so that's just sharing. That's what I know firsthand of the impact that's happening. So
I was speaking to the Responsible Investment Association of Australia, Simon O'Connor, and they're extremely passionate about this space. And I think he mentioned as well in his conversation, the challenge is everyone's passionate about responsible investing. The key issue is, how do we get our own members to be more responsible internally with their people and their own sustainability efforts? But
so are you talking about, is he walking the walk, or is he still just talking the talk with us?
And he talked about it. He was authentic. He goes, this is my challenge. How do I get each of my members of our community to actually do the sustainability for their own companies? They might be passionate about investing responsibly, but are they internally doing themselves with their employees and stuff? So that's the question.
Yeah, well, I think that's always been an interesting one with advice, for example, in terms of my stuff. When I was bringing them on, I got them to do a full fact find, and I do suggest it to other advisors that they actually walk through the advice process from the client side. and you have that insurance conversation with them and go, and they're like, well, I don't need it, like, because they're often in their 20s, like the staff members that are coming into practices. And I found that was a good experience with them, because it gave them a different perspective and sort of got them to get in the mind of what a client would be experiencing.
Correct.
So,
and also, I think, there's a difference between being sustainable and, a lot of companies want to be sustainable and do the right thing sustainably and ethically. But if there's no point if your people are being treated like shit, right? And this is for me the difference between a great company and a good company and a great company is, yes, we do sustainability, we do all this stuff for the environment, but our people internally, the employee engagement score is like 30%, right? So that for me is not a sustainable company. Okay.
Actually, that's a good point you raise around the employee engagement. So, like we've said, that the best way to just improve it is just spend time and be present with employees and sort of and be open and allow them to have comfortable communication with you. But in terms of measuring where you're at, what are some of the ways that, so that engagement score and that sort of thing, how do they go about? Can you tell us a bit more about that, and maybe how advisors could do that internally with their businesses?
Well, I mean, employee engagement score, a lot of people are critical of them as well, because they do it once a year and they expect that once a year is good enough, and every year they'll do it. And it's big companies do that.
And they do it after the bonuses have been paid.
Yeah, correct. So it's not really, you should know as a leader in your practice and in your team, if people are disengaged, right? You can tell. You can tell by the way they behave, it becomes obvious when they're not really into the work, or they're just ticking the boxes and they can't wait to get out of the door. So it's almost having the real conversation. Is this something you want to really be here, or are you just doing this because you want to make a buck? Right.
So it's more of an intuitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And, tell me those honest conversations with people. And that's the key is what drives you. And if people will have passions outside of work, how can you bring their passion into work? Are you passionate about painting, or you're passionate about, I don't know, whatever it is, DJing? Do you want to come and do a set after work on a Friday afternoon? I don't know, something, be really creative around how do we combine people's passion with work and bringing it together in the workplace, because we're humans, man. We're not just machines at work and then humans after work, right? So it's almost, how do you integrate the two to actually look at the entire person and saying, well, what else are you into? You want to bring your dog to work today or something? Do you have a dog at home? And so going beyond just that, come and do your job and get out of here. It's beyond that, right?
Well, I know there's a couple of good examples out in the advice industry of this occurring. Andrew Rocks from Announcer Group, they've done a lot of work around the health and wellness with their employees. So everyone wearing Fitbits, actually mandated time in the day for exercise within the working day.
Awesome.
And yeah, they've I think they've gotten some really good outcomes out of that in terms of and they've looked into it. So it's if anyone's listening, reach out to Adrian. He did a great session with the AFA event the other night. It was really good, and they're sort of talking about a few of these things. So I think it's a bit sort of like everyone's got to sort of walk away today and actually do something off the back of this. Go have a chat with your employees, take them for a beer, or and I guess would you say that one side of it is actually sharing a bit more of yourself with them?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you want somebody to be real with you, you got to be real first, right? You can't expect to say, hey, listen, let's, share something about what's going on for you. But they're like, well, I'm not sure, because, but if I say first, I take the lead and I share something about who I am and what's my bit of my personal life like, and whatever's going on for me on a personal front, then that gives permission for other people to open up and start sharing their what's going on for them. And, and it's the world is becoming so integrated that there's really no difference between work and play anymore. It's people are on emails 24 hours. They're checking emails at night. They're working in the day. They're dropping kids at school in the daytime. So so you can't really draw a fine line anymore, around work and home. It's just the same thing.
Well, yeah, so I'm really getting a great exposure to that with the team in the Philippines that I'm working with. So you sort of like, you've got this huge disconnect. They're in another country. So forming those connections through conversation when you can't have that physical presence. Yeah, it's been pretty crucial, and I felt it's come down to just time on the phone or on Skype, really. Yeah, it's a really. I was hoping for some shortcuts, Muneesh, but all you're saying is we just got to spend more time talking to people.
Yeah, well, mate, the best businesses, no matter how big or small, are run like a family. So, the owner or the runner or the business is pretty much like the dad or father or mother. And basically, you got a bunch of people who are in the family. You treat them like your family. You treat them like your cousins. You like your kids. Why would you treat an employee any different than you would your kids or your brother or your family? Why? Just because they're working with you. 8 hours a day you're with them. You're probably more with them than you are with your own family. So why would you be a different person?
Well, I can see some issues arising for some people if they're reflecting on their relationships with their siblings.
Correct. So in fact, you have a chance to create a new relationship, which is probably better than the one you have at home.
I think that's sort of going to tick the box with a few more people, I think.
Correct. And people spend 12 hours a day hanging out with their work colleagues sometimes. So you gotta. It's the more human you can make that interaction, the better the conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's. Have you? What have some things that you've done in the past in terms of like trying to broaden that engagement with?
Oh man, I'm pretty. I've learned over time to be a bit more transparent about who I am, and I have no problem sharing any girlfriend challenges I have, or stuff that's going on at home with my family and stuff. It's so everyone has them. Everyone has issues with stuff with friends, family, girlfriends, wives, husbands, kids, whatever. So. I think it's fair income to everyone's got them, and I have to share that first. Where then that's it. Oh wow, okay. Then it kind of starts to open up other people, and they become more comfortable about sharing what's going on for them, and that builds the relationship, and therefore people become so close to that, it becomes like a family that they don't want to leave. They just want to stick around because they're like, man, I can be myself in an office, which is so cool because no one holds me. No one, is looking at me strangely if I'm doing something different because that's just me, and I'm allowed to bring my whole self to the workplace.
So is this? I don't know. I'm taking this where I'd like to see it go. Is this a suggestion to sort of reduce things that may have been social conformity or social norms that maybe don't have a good reason for being there? Is that what I'm hearing? Am I taking too much out of this? Or?
Yeah, well, I mean, people had this thing about rigidity between, this is office and that's, you can't talk about certain things, right? And it's almost as a conditioning that's come into play that this is professional and, you have to just work and there's nothing else but work. But that's not sustainable. It really isn't. And you can't, and I know in the past, we used to have put on a different mask in the workplace and then go home and that mask has gone off and now I'm a brother, mother, father, whatever I am. And it's like, that's not congruent. That's not authentic. That's just bottling up stuff internally and creating potential issues in the workplace,
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm trying to think about what I've got blocking. I've always been pretty good, just sharing, pretty open. But the one thing that I haven't been doing, it's sort of been like this one rule that I've got, which is not having employees on Facebook.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. What do you?
Yeah, well, I've actually got my business called. Some of my leaders who spoke in my conferences. One is a CFO, one is a CIO, marketing director. They're on my Facebook. To be honest, what is on my Facebook that is super private? I mean, all my information is out there anyways. People know your data. I'm not sharing any. I honestly don't share anything on Facebook that's offensive. So they can look at my photos with my girlfriend or with my mate or whatever, and so what?
Yeah, see, I think that could be the issue because even though recently
depending what you get up to with your girlfriend, then that's difficult.
Yeah, I'm just like my Facebook goes back quite a bit, and I've matured in that time. But early days, I don't know. There's been some good gold. I don't know if you'd want journalists getting in there, but I suppose that's just complete vulnerability and openness.
Yeah, that's you have to decide what boundaries are right for you, I guess. Everyone's comfortable at different levels.
Oh, I'm pretty comfortable with it. I don't know. Do you think I should get rid of that rule? Should I add my employees on Facebook or accept it?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, if you look at their profile photos as well and their past photos, they probably have some photos back in the day. What's the worst? You're dressed up at a party, which was fancy dress or something, and you had maybe a couple of drinks too much. Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
Oh,
probably the worst photo you've seen on Facebook. Is probably a slightly, one couple of drinks down, too much Adrian. That's pretty much it, really.
yeah. Well, that's a lot of people have seen that. So it's not really like it's a unique thing that people haven't seen.
Correct.
Clay's. Apparently, there's an event you've got on coming up. What's coming up with
Yeah,
him?
so we've got an event on November 15th called the Change Leadership Summit,
Mm-hmm.
changeleadership.com.au.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much all about what does it take to lead change effectively,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we drive change within businesses. So it's all about values-based leadership and the importance of who do you have to be as a leader to drive successful change. So yeah,
Okay.
come along if you guys can.
How do people get involved with that?
Oh, just the website, changeleadership.com.au.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on a page as well, humanityinbusiness.com.au. So
Yeah, nice.
all details are there, and just get in touch, and happy to give you a discount because you're listening to the podcast.
Ah, nice one. Everyone likes a good discount. Well, yeah. So I think if anyone's been listening out there and they like the idea of it, they're not sure about the next steps. Maybe checking out what Muneesh has been doing. Check out his website, and there might be something in there for you to just take a bit of action and walk the walk.
Yeah, right.
Muneesh, thank you for coming on. It's been
Thanks, man.
great talking to you. Thanks for sharing your experience with what you've been
It
doing.
was a pleasure. I
It's
really enjoyed that. Good fun.
it's an awesome project that you've been working on, and like the fact that it's going after quite a number of years and it's still
Still
moving
around.
forward. It's a testament.
Still around.
Yeah, so well done.
Thanks, man. Thank you, and good on you guys for keep on doing the great work XY is doing. I love it, and I'm sure you got all your community really enjoys being part of it. So keep up the great work as well, XY team. Good on you, man. Good on you, Adrian.
Thanks, Muneesh. Well, just a shout out to the guys in Melbourne tonight that are coming to the event. Looking forward to seeing you there. We've got a sold out event. It's sold out for a few weeks. It's at this great whiskey joint, Candelaria or something. Looking forward to it. It's gonna be fun, and yeah, we'll see everyone next week for